Hey folks, the coffee's just finishing being made, so we'll start in a moment. I'll get things organized while that's happening. There we go. All right, welcome to the November 6th, 2023 OnCreds Working Group meeting. Mainly, we'll look at a couple of PRs, but mainly to discuss design and planning of an OnCreds V1 in W3C verifiable credentials data model standard format. I have a short form to type that, so I don't have to type all those words whenever I do say it. Reminder, this is a Linux Foundation and Hyperledger Foundation meeting. So the Linux Foundation antitrust policy is in effect, as is the code of conduct. Welcome to all joining. Good to have folks here. I recognize everybody. Artem, I'm sorry you're here. I know it's a holiday where you are, but appreciate you coming. And sorry about that. It's fine if you aren't. PRs, I guess Mike just left to do some PRs. I'll just quickly open that up. Yeah, Mike can deal with those. We're getting down to finishing off the work of the V1 spec and getting down to the last steps. I put in a checklist yesterday as an issue, so have those completed, which is good. Let's get into the OnCreds V1 discussion that was put into place last week. So we have a BC Gov code with us. DSR was awarded that one. So Alexander and Artem are here from DSR. They put together the document so far. We've got the full an OnCreds RS 266 in that. This section is here. Which talks about the design questions. Should we just jump into that? Is that the place to start, Alexander or Artem, or do you want to do anything else to head into this?
Yeah, just a short intro. Who wasn't aware of our work? Yeah, there is an opened merge request into OnCreds RS repository. The goal of this merge request to provide a design document. Currently, there are two main documents we are interested in. The first one is a section we are going to add into OnCreds specification itself. It reflects how we are going to convert credentials previously issued, how they can be mapped into W3C format, and CL signature proof can be put on it. And another document is mostly addressed to OnCreds RS library itself. There are listed a number of questions we are going to answer to achieve our goals. They directly impact the path solution. And thank you everyone who already provided comments and feedbacks and thoughts on the PR. I wasn't able to process all of them yet, but it's something that we are going to work this week. And who hasn't seen this work yet, feel free, welcome to put your thoughts as well, so we can achieve better standard. In fact, in original W3C document, there are already some drafts done by Brent Zundel in the past, but I wasn't able to find any concrete details how it should work from his perspective. It just looked like some thoughts which are not really realistic, and it's not clear what was his vision. And we took a proof of concept done by Andrew Whitehead in Python. His scripts to convert indie legacy styled credentials in proofs, and how he envisioned the transition. We did some changes in structure. Internally, we discussed in DSR folks and make some adoptions, how we see it. And the result is these two documents. Yeah, so Steven, can you open, I think, W3C representation MD document? This one contains goals. Once again, is to provide methods to convert, to be able create W3C formatted credentials and put uncreate CL signature of them. Also to be able to create presentations in both formats, in legacy and W3C as well. We also want to be able to use previously issued credentials, which initially was done in legacy form, but now let's say we talk with a modern verifier who wants represented, and optionally some additional API methods to provide some helpers for W3C credential itself. We are not going to cover all cases and provide methods to do signatures, different types like RSA or BBS. We just want to provide some basic interface so we can combine methods from AnonCredSRS and some third-party libraries. What's out of scope of our works is verification of validity. These internal signatures, RSA, BBS, create presentations using another signature, not CL1, and support different types of presentation requests, like diff, for example. Yeah, so we can jump to the questions list. I tried to write all of them, which were previously spread over these two documents, and to put them into a single place, so we can work through each of them and make an answer, and it impacts on the design. There are also proposed answer from our side for a bunch of them, probably not, but it's something we need to do. And next we can start on the implementation.
Okay.
I'm sorry, before we jump to the question, can you please clarify, there was a number of comments, why we mentioned presentation conversion is optional. I think I tried to answer it, but yeah, maybe let's just discuss it in more details, because it was a confusion.
Also in the very end of this document, we tried to provide some sample scripts, how we see current applications working new methods. Very end. You can scroll. Yeah, here is it. And potentially we see three different situations, like credential was issued in the past, and now it tries, holder tries to make W3C presentation. Another case is new credential was issued, and now I try to make legacy styled presentation. And the third case is in both flows, I use new functions, new format. And we noticed that in fact, we do not need to convert presentation itself. We only need to convert credential to cover both cases, because we are going to provide separate methods to create presentation and verify it. These methods will only work with W3C credential and presentation. But in order to support legacy credentials, I need to be able to convert it into a compatible form. And for this reason, we marked presentation steps conversion methods as optional. And in case we do not want to duplicate presentation related methods, we have to implement conversion methods, but it will be extra step and extra parsing and processing. But instead, it will be much better to create independent duplication methods, creating an output in W3C format itself. So, like, there are 4 sections connected to API. The first section is about conversion of INDI credentials to W3C form and back. These methods are required, and this is something we must to implement. Another section set of methods is connected to the flow of issuance and presentations. In total, you may notice that there are 6 methods connected to the messages processing. 4 of them create credentials and presentations. We have to duplicate anyway to make API cleaner. And I provided list points why we should to do it. And 2 of them create offer and request. This type of messages are not directly connected to W3C specification and format. This is something optional. We can either duplicate them and have a full list of new methods to process, because I haven't seen a design on the level on top of an on-creds, let's say AFJ, how they are going to work with it. But I expect there will be a different type of attachment message, and this type point that W3C credential will be the result of the flow execution. And from my perspective, it will be much simpler to use separate API on each step to process. So here in this sample scripts, I duplicated methods to create credential offer and credential request, despite that we are not going to change message itself. And third section of API methods, this is about identity proof and credential modifications. Right now, we do not see the case why it may be needed. Basically, it's responsibility of the application, I believe. But in case we imagine some situations and real need, we can add methods like append additional signature to the credential, modify it somehow, set some metadata, maybe like just helper methods.
Cool. So do you want to go to the questions now?
Yes, I think, yeah, just one more notice regarding the API. This is first version. This is draft and may contain some changes in future because we haven't started implementation yet. And usually when you start working, you find something new, some simplifications. But first, our vision is a set of parameters of messages. It will be almost the same like before, because we still keep using same signature, and it depends on the same data. We are not going to change domain model itself. We only change the format of credential and proof. Probably some data required for doing presentation may be reworked, but we do not have answer yet for it. Okay. And yeah, there are something can be changed in future still. Yeah, now we can jump to questions. Yeah, there are 10 questions as far as
Is
I
it-
remember.
I noticed there's two parts. Is it this we want to go through, or I noticed there was more questions up above, I think.
No, I moved all of them
Okay.
into this document. Yeah,
Okay.
previously specification document also included them, but I decided it will be much difficult to cover and
Okay.
don't miss them and put them in this single place. Yeah, the first question is credential offer and credential request. As I already mentioned, this is not connected, it's not covered in W3C model, and question whether should we do something with it or keep using, because if we refer to ARIA's issuance protocol second version, it's even for LD credential case, it consists of 3 steps, same offer, request, and issue. And for LD attachments, I noticed that there are some kind of adoption, and even offer and requests like align it with W3C, even do not contain all the required data in the message. And the question here is, should we do it in our work as well and try to make them look similar or keep as is?
So can we add, this is where my lack of knowledge of Rust and interfaces, can we add like a format, optional format item that is, you know, legacy, W3C, either
To existing
enumerated value, would that be possible?
you mean to add into existing API methods or into JSON
so
messages?
for credential offer and credential request, you could optionally say, as an issuer, you can say format. It can be either, and a holder can conversely respond with, you know, a format.
Mm-hmm.
Is that worth doing?
Yeah, it should be doable, and it will be breaking change on Rust on C API level, but I think we can handle it on wrappers, so it will not even be breaking change there. But yeah, we can indicate that this offer is intended to create W3C credential.
At the AnonCreds level, though, the either doesn't make sense. It needs to be at the protocol level. It would have to be done that way.
In protocol messages, we also can put such flag for sure.
Yeah, but that's not at the AnonCreds RS level. So I don't think the offer and the request have to change at all. Yeah, sorry, I wasn't thinking about that right. I don't think they need to change at all. The only thing that needs to, it's the protocol that would have something on it, and I'm not sure what that is. But by the time you call the AnonCreds RS library, you'll know what to do. The credential offer and request would not change at all. So, and they don't need to know what form the credential will be issued, I don't think. It's simply the final method that says, hey, I want this in, and that would be done by calling the appropriate API endpoint. So I would say nothing here.
Yeah, like our suggestion was the same. No any conversion, just use existing messages. And it will be much faster and simpler for top applications.
The triggers about which to produce, that's at a higher level than the AnonCreds RS library. So I don't think, okay. Okay.
So we commit answer, like I'll update the document
Yeah.
to reflect our decisions, and answer is
Okay.
no. We don't
Question 2, I do think we want these, right?
duplicate all methods.
Yeah, well, we don't need the offer or request. They don't change, but the other 4 methods I think do. And that reflects what you had down at the bottom, right?
At the bottom, I duplicated all.
Yeah,
Even create offer and request.
I suspect the offer request doesn't make any sense. They're not going to be any different. You could have, you know, duplicate names, hopefully not duplicate code, but I don't think it would make any change.
Yeah, we can just duplicate API methods, but internally they will call same functions, and
Yeah.
no change in messages. But just in case in future we decide to update offer and request, it will be much simpler to duplicate API.
Okay. This one I'm intrigued with, your presentation agnostic. I'm not sure how tied in it, you know, where the work gets done between the Aries framework, for example, and OnCred's library, the presentation request handling. So I'm not sure the answer to that. I would assume, you know, I don't think we plan to change the presentation request in any way. So it's likely the protocol will use the normal and OnCred's presentation request, but what gets passed to an OnCred's RS, I'm not sure of. So what did you mean by presentation agnostic?
Currently functions accept proof which matches to the Aries specification, I believe, same format and same groups of attributes. For example, there can be revealed, unrevealed, predicates, and self-attest. And all of these data are put into a single structure, and this structure is indie-styled. And in order to validate all of these kinds, and there are also attribute groups, five kinds. And in order to validate such proof request, we put corresponding data into proof itself to make them compatible with each other and make a corresponding validation. But in fact, in W3C standard, we do not have self-attested attributes anymore. There are weak support for unrevealed data, unrevealed attributes. I believe there are mostly used 2 types, revealed attributes and predicates. And people do not worry about different kinds. So if we make API to accept only list, let's say list of requested attributes and list of requested predicates, so we will be able to make proof structure easier as well. We will not to provide exact mapping to validate the structure of each message against each other.
So I think what you're saying is so this comes down to that mapping data structure.
In fact, yes.
Yeah, I think we should keep it. I don't know, shoot. I know in Akapai there is additional checking done to make sure that the proof matches the presentation request.
This check, I think, currently is done inside of OnCred's RS methods.
It is?
There is such kind of verification, but in fact, if you have unrevealed attribute, a presentation just contains like statement for this referent in proof request.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
attribute wasn't revealed, and there is an index of subproof. But in fact, proof doesn't contain any info about this attribute, and validation. Application doing validation of such an revealed attribute only can just trust. It cannot check somehow that it actually was put into the proof itself. And it only can validate to make right this make it true, like that revealed attributes and predicates. It can validate that holder was honest and didn't lie with the structure of the message, because names of revealed attributes and predicates are included in the crypto proof value. But all other kinds are not included, and it like can be false positive. Let's say I can change the structure payload which is not signed somehow and put them that I have it, but it's unrevealed, and can lie. So this is why we suggest to get rid of of this data structure, because it some confusion maybe.
So in other words, Artem, please correct me if I'm wrong, we are kind of questioning the existing way for validation, and now it seems that part of this validation makes sense, but part of this validation related to unrevealed attributes is just doesn't make sense. It's kind of redundant. And since we've been working on this format, we've been changing. I think it's probably a good time now to question it and maybe simplify it if it makes sense and doesn't cause any issues. That it seems that it should not do the things worse, but only better in terms of the size of the proof, in terms of the compliance with W3C format, in terms of making it more agnostic to the legacy in the specific data structures and so on.
Yeah, thank you for the cup.
Okay, I would say, can we make this? Can you maybe describe how you think it would affect callers of the library to do this? Like, what would change for the callers? So AFJ and Akapai and Aries VCX, what would be different for those if we do this?
Like I'm looking into AFJ code right now, and I do not see any presentation, any analyzation of requested proof and proof value. It only calls an creates method to verify presentation, and it trust to result.
Okay, and Akapai I think does more than that, but we could look at that.
Yeah, and Akapai can still validate revealed and attributes and predicates if we put it into subject, and it just do not have information about unrevealed attributes, which exactly credential contains it.
Okay.
Yeah, and
okay, I mean, I guess we go with that. I'd
just one to recap my point that previously in legacy format we put unrevealed credentials into proof, but in fact crypto proof doesn't contain any information about this unrevealed attribute.
Yeah,
and this is kind of confusion.
Unrevealed attributes are simply requested attributes that the holder decides not to reveal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which gives the holder probably more, you know, either don't respond at all or respond in what was asked. Okay. Yeah, if I could just get a little more detail so I can take it to the, you know, if it doesn't affect AFJ at all, that's good. I'd like to understand a bit more how it affects Akapai. But I think that's good. Let's go with your answer. Okay,
Fourth question is about signing and verifications using different kinds of identity proof signatures. And I saw you already answered in comments that we do not need such methods. It should be done by some third-party library. And so the current proposed answer is right. It matches to your vision.
and just to be clear, so that means AFJ and Akapai, if they want to have a multiple signatures, a CL signature on and an on-creds, a W3C and on-creds credential, they would just make another call to a different library and attach the proof. Agreed?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
Good.
I mean, Farton, yeah, we're also going to attach extended demos at the bottom of this page with this use case, right? So we already have, I think, these methods that can help to do it from unencrypted's point of view. So yeah, I think a demo would also be helpful here and
Excellent.
be reviewed by AFJ and Akapai implemented.
Yeah, perfect. Obviously there's a significant difference in these two, so I think the compact encoding would be better. 2.5 times. Yeah, I noticed that it was pretty significant. Thanks for pointing out the example. If you want to start from the basic approach, but I'm not sure, don't you pretty much have the compact encoding already? And if so, why not just use it?
In fact, yeah, it shouldn't be a big deal to implement it in Rust because all steps are already done in Python sample, maybe some refactoring, and and also we discussed third option to try to use another standard library like MessagePack or Protobuf. Maybe it can get us the same output, same benefits in the value. But if no, we can implement that already done in Python POC because the difference is dramatic. Significant. Reason is quite simple because when you do serialization into JSON, each digit, not digit, everything is string, and it takes same size during the conversion into bytes, but in fact, because we use numbers, it can be represented taking much less space.
Okay, so I would.
I think that would be really good notice finding from Andrew, and just it's a little bit sad that we didn't done it in the past when we worked on areas standards because it can allow us to make messages much smaller.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the proposal to start with the basic approach is not just because we don't do it or it's difficult, but rather just to kind of prioritize the implementation steps and to have the first working POC as soon as possible so that AFJ and Akapai guys can start their integration on their side, right? And while once the first kind of POC API is done, we can do to the next step and maybe implement this encoding. Yeah, that was the main reason.
So, I mean, I would say it's fine to start, but the goal would be that we finish, either way we finish with the compact encoding, right? What steps you take, but the goal would be that we do in the end, we'll have the compact encoding.
Yeah, all right. First, we will provide working functions doing credential conversions and issuance. And when it's done, the next step will be provide encoding implementation.
Okay. And then if there's some sudden reason not to use it, we'll have a fallback. Okay. Yeah, we're not doing more complex we're still just doing an attribute list. We're not going to do nesting. We're not going to do arrays or objects. Agreed?
Yeah, it's fine for us. Just one this, more comments on this point. Sample what we envisioned the situation. Like issuer creates an address, a credential containing address attribute itself, and also two sub nested fields, city and address. And verifier can request address itself, and all data will be revealed included in the proof, or verifier can only request a subfield. It just seems to make flow simpler in some
I
cases.
mean, my suggestion would be that we don't support nested structures at all. And we simply support what an OnCred supports today, which is, just a list, no nesting. And then we don't have to deal with this.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. It makes sense for now. Just also a bit of history why we proposed, not actually proposed, but kind of raised this point, because it seems this feature is being implemented in other selective disclosure like specifications like ZJVT and so on. They do have this feature. So we are thinking, if we start thinking about kind of the new generation of Stellar Uncreds format, why don't also consider it? In terms of kind of implementation, maybe this phase, I agree that maybe let's stick with the current plain key value claims, but maybe it makes sense to put kind of a small paragraph, a couple of sentences, a spec mentioning that in future versions we may consider these, maybe useful in the future.
In OnCreds v2, yes, I fully agree with that. I'm just talking about the work we're doing right now should not. Yes, agree that in v2 we need to be able to support this, and with different signature schemes, like going with BBS Plus, and I believe PS signatures also support it being able to have arrays and things like that. So yes, agree that we can do that in the future, and okay with putting it into the documentation, but I don't think from an implementation point of view we want to do anything on this. Yeah, so this is the one we had some back and forth this morning. Again, in this work for the code with us, all we support are AnonCreds credentials. We don't, we support any AnonCreds credential in W3C format, but not the reverse. And so we don't want to change the implementations to support W3C form, nested arrays, nested objects arrays, or anything. So again, we agree on that. Question 7.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, good. I would say no, definitely not a holder did, and no ID attribute. The only way we could do it is the ID attribute is the link secret somehow, and I don't know how we would do that.
I think the point here is that yes, for existing attributes, for existing credentials, for migration of existing credentials, it would be problematic, it may be even impossible in some cases to do it. But if you are talking about issuance of new credentials, and especially if you would like to issue credential with both CL Uncreds proof and some other standard proof, then usually for other standard proof, having like a DID of the holder as one of the IDs for further proof of possession is a natural way. So maybe that's why we are wondering if we should mention this ID attribute as an optional, of course, not a mandatory field in this presentation.
So the idea there would be that one of the attributes would be holder did, And in a non-creds, you'd be smart enough to never disclose it. I don't know. It just, I don't think we should get into that in this implementation. It's too, we're trying to constrain the implementation. So I would say we don't include that. That makes you're right, but that makes a verification proof, a verifiable presentation of a non-cred signature very difficult.
Because yeah, if you took,
Yeah.
for example, an existing credential with a non-unencrypted signature, usually it has
Yeah.
ID with some
Yeah.
DID, and if you decide to add unencrypted for this credential, it would be hard to do it without kind of accepting this ID field as one of the fields there. So yeah, it's kind of maybe not a good in terms of selective disclosure from in unencrypted world, but it's fine in non-unencrypted world where like additional credentials.
And okay, if you could think about this, is there any way to use the link secret? Like, is it different per credential? I've not looked close enough at the aggregate. No, it's got to be different per, right? Because the aggregate proof proves that the link secret is the same across all the credentials, but it's going to appear differently. So that's not a way to do that. Yeah, I don't think.
Actually, as far as I remember, Tom may correct me if I'm wrong, but there is a special kind of metadata attribute. It's called M2 in unencrypted, which is usually used like as an identifier of the holder. It's usually blinded, so it's not like as close as this, but usually the holder DID can be passed there and blinded and kind of be part of the credential.
Okay, so let's raise that as a possibility, but that's the only one, is if we could use M2 as the ID field. Since the M2 is shared, it would be okay to use it as the ID field. I'll check with Andrew and Mike on, and if you could think about it as well, is there any way to use that as an identifying object? But even then, there's no way to produce a proof on the M2 value.
So maybe let's kind of split two use cases. So the first use case, where we just create a new credential from scratch, which may contain multiple proofs, unencrypted and non-unencrypted. Are we okay in this case to let this optional ID field to be present, like in all other standard verifiable credentials?
So what you're suggesting is so can we leave it up to the issuer to do that?
Basically, yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
If we leave it up to the issuer, yes, I'm fine with that. They literally call it ID and they put it in, then I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
And then a clever non-creds implementation does not reveal that, but that's again up to the holder and the verifier. And then for the verify, and then when they present a different signature, they could sign the VP with that. Yeah, I think that's the approach. So it's up to the issuer, basically. non-creds doesn't do anything about it, but we document that an issuer could do that.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
that was the reason.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just summarize, the goal here is don't break any existing properties of unancreds, of course,
Exactly.
like privacy preserving property, but at the same time, don't break the standard approaches for non-unancreds world,
Okay.
which we also are going to kind of
Yeah.
support in terms of identity proof. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Got it. That's interesting. Question 9 is interesting.
It's still some connected to mapping field we already discussed. This is how we can represent predicates in presentation, and in original specifications there is a part about the derivation of new attributes which are predicates in fact, and this is one option, and another option is just using embedded objects, but it will be in presentation cases, not in credentials itself.
So this is in the. This is going to go into a presentation. Why would we just not put true or false?
It goes to the credential subject part, right?
Right. So the credential subject is the values that you're passing.
Yeah.
Actually, just another option how we can show it, share it.
I think it should be just true false. Because when you're sending, so this is going to go in the presentation, and by that time, the predicate.
Sorry for interrupting. Also,
Yeah.
idea here that we need to restore the type of predicate because the type is needed to do crypto verification, and this is why I reflected to these forms. We need the name of attribute and its type.
Yeah,
And also
And
probably from UI UX rendering, if it's just true false, it will be not clear. It won't be clear what exactly is true false. We need some kind of mapping. We decided to get rid of mapping in terms of this data structure, but still we need enough sufficient information to understand what was proved actually, right? So that's why like the predicate type and the predicate value needs to be present there, but we just need to decide how exactly it needs to be present.
can we not assume the verifier has to know that? Like the verifier has passed a presentation request with the predicates in. And we've got two methods back. One is we include the presentation request. I mean, that's what a non-creds does today, is it includes the presentation request in the presentation. But it would seem that the verifier could assume it knows its the presentation request it used. And therefore, yeah, I've never understood why we had to include it other than the mappings. The mappings make sense to me, but including the actual presentation request wouldn't seem to be needed. And this type of information, the verifier should know because they requested it. They requested the predicate, and therefore birth date : true false would seem to be sufficient. Am I missing something?
I think it's needed for verification on the crypto part, right? And one of the goals, as we discussed, is at least try to investigate if it's possible to make this API on unancreds level independent of presentation request, like the exact format and so on.
Yeah.
But we still need to have this values predicate type and the value for the crypto, for verification crypto. That's why actually it was like before. Previously in mapping, we also had these values, and Here we are also still preserving these values, but we just want to make it in a more with different format, not as part of the mapping, which seems a more redundant. It contains some useless information, as we discussed, about unrevealed attributes and so on. But here we just keep part of this information in a format which seems to be more compatible with W3C format. So yeah, the answer is needed for verification on the crypto level. And the goal here is to keep minimally sufficient information in a convenient and compact format.
Yeah, this one, I'm confused. Yeah, I just don't get the context of why this is needed, so I'm not helpful here. We already know the format. We know we're giving them a presentation in an on-creds format, so there's not multiple signatures on this. All right, I don't know the answer to that. I can't help you. To me, it just seems, having true false is all we need here, but I'm obviously missing something.
Okay, probably let's think a bit more about it on our side.
Okay.
And also, we may add some more clarifications, this week, and continue discussion. I think it's not that critical, but yeah.
Yeah, and then the mapping, we definitely want to move the mapping under proof value if we have it. Again, I'm okay, the actual proofs have to be there, but the mapping sounds like it can be left off, so I'm okay with that. Well, yeah, I'm still not convinced about the mapping, but anyway. I just don't know how the libraries, as you say, you don't think AFJ does anything with it. I'd be kind of intrigued with what Akapai does with it.
Yes, yes. So there is an action item on our side to double check it.
If you could do that, that'd be, yeah. Okay. Awesome. That was great. Thank you. I think all looks good. The public API, I'm not the one, and we've lost we've lost Berend and Ariel, so they would be able to help more with this. Andrew's traveling this week, but I'll try to have him take a look at this as well. But I think it looks like a go from, you know better than I do on this one, so I can't help here. Good. Anything else to go over?
I think we are good for now, and thank
Awesome.
you for providing answers. And we have more or less enough information to keep working, and even can start implementation part of our work as well in parallel with the design updates. And I'll promise to process comments from all of reviewers this week.
Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you. That was great. Really appreciate it. Have a good one. Take care. Bye.
Thank you. Nice day. Bye.